it's been a month. What can I say? We haven't rolled that bump in 4.5 weeks now, so kind of forgot about it. Sorry about that. So like I was saying, we're going to kind of walk you through everything that you will need to know in order to do pre-production, production, and even post-production when it comes to hosting a month-long virtual event. So we're going to be talking about planning, preparing, testing, and testing again, because that is going to be what we're going to say the most is test, 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 have backup plans, and be accommodating. If I had to pick three things that I would say the most is test, have backup plans, and be accommodating to your guests. We're going to talk about ways that you can have different content in terms of bringing in your guest and making it look visually different, and then some just general tech tips throughout the entire month. Things that we learned, things that we stumbled over, hiccups that we had, and how we were able to solve those. So hopefully you don't have to worry about it in your production. So first thing we're going to talk about is preparation, of course. So once you know who your guests are and that you want to reach out to about the topics that you want to talk about, the first thing you're going to ask them is, how do you want to show up on the show? Do you want to be live in studio like Gregor is here? Do you want to be a virtual guest like Dan is from Bird Dog there? Or possibly two guests in virtual with Jeremy Morris and Chris Burgos? Or do you want to pre-record your show and then we will air it as if it's live? So there's three different ways that you can do this, and they're all perfectly viable, but you're going to ask your guests what's easiest for them, what makes it easy for them. Because again, you want to be accommodating to your guests. They're doing you a favor. So once you know your topic and how they are going to join, the next thing that you're going to have to do is find a time slot for them. And so the biggest thing that we're going to say is to make sure that you use a time slot that you have already established. We do a show every Tuesday at 3 o'clock. Broadfield does a show every Thursday at 1 o'clock. So those were the first time slots that we gave out to our guests or suggested to our guests. Tuesdays at 3, Thursdays at 1. The next thing that we did was we expanded our time slots on Tuesdays and Thursdays, knowing that our audience still pays attention on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we added a 10 o'clock time slot to Tuesdays, and we added a 3:30 time slot to Thursdays. And then if our guests still couldn't work with those time frames, we added the occasional Wednesday time slot. And for our personal audience, we've noticed that we don't get much views on Fridays and Mondays, probably close to the weekend. So we took advantage of that. And instead of trying to make a show on Mondays and Fridays, we would try and do our test calls. And so before we get to test calls, though, we're actually going to talk about, again, you already know how they're going to be joining in terms of if it's going to be virtual or in person. But once you've determined whether or not it's going to be virtual in person, if they are virtual, the next thing that you're going to want to ask is, how do you want to join? There are tons of different ways that you can join virtually. Teams, Zoom, SRT feeds. Lots of cameras do SRT feeds now. Facebook Messenger, whatever it may be. And then you're going to go from there. After that, you're going to ask them, do you have access to a PTZ camera, a studio, a webcam? That way you can prepare your show knowing what their limitations are. We had some guests that would join and all they had was a webcam. And that doesn't mean that you can't have a great show. You absolutely can have a great show. You're just going to know, okay, if they're using a webcam, it's probably going to be a little bit lower quality in terms of video. So maybe I don't bring them up full screen, or I only do if it's something very important. Whereas a perfect example is Paul Richards from PTZ Optics. They just made this whole huge studio. They have 5 cameras in it, and they had a switcher hooked up to their Teams call, and it was awesome to be able to just basically throw our show to them for several minutes at a time. But again, this is something that you need to know beforehand so you know how the workflow and how the flow of the show is going to happen. And once you have that information, you're going to schedule a test call. Now, like I said, we knew that Mondays and Fridays weren't going to be good show days, So we chose to make those our test call days. And one thing I will say though is if you cannot schedule a test call to make sure that the technology works, to make sure that you have your presentation materials in line with your guest, ask them if they can join, a half an hour early on the day of the recording. A perfect example of that would be Dan from Bird Dog, CEO, great guy. He had a really jam-packed schedule. He was not able to do a test call the day before the show, but the morning of, he said, hey, I can come in 45 minutes early. So we had him in 45 minutes early. We made sure that everything was up and running. We were able to do a quick walkthrough and everything went fine without a hitch. So you do want to make sure that you can test at least a little bit before you go live. You don't want to take everything and just throw it up in the air. So definitely always test, test, test. Now, those are things that are basically out of your control. You're accommodating, you can suggest things, but they're out of your control. We're going to talk about things that we have full control over, including all of the physical hardware in our studio. So right now, we are using a TriCaster 1 Pro, which is a great switcher / encoder that NewTek offers. And right now, Adam is operating our TriCaster. He's doing a great job. And I don't want to go into too much specifics, but I will just give a quick shout out. We did a video a couple months ago, maybe 2 months ago now, where we explained exactly not only why we upgraded to a TriCaster 1 Pro, but how we did it and the steps to do that. We're really trying to show you that we're using this equipment and making it as easy as we can for you when it's your turn to do this. So definitely check out that video. It's very cool. We're also using a 2-stripe controller to be able to, have things be a little bit more tactile instead of having to use the mouse to click on things and, make macros on the keyboard, which we do have macros, but having that extra 2 stripes of tactile feedback with lights and color coding makes things so much easier. Now we're going to move on to cameras. In our studio, we typically run on a 3-camera setup, occasionally adding a 4th camera when we have a guest in person. So primarily, we're on this camera right here. This is a Panasonic CX350. It's a great camera. It's 4K, good high dynamic range, very good in low light, even though we have plenty of light in here, but it is very good in low light. And that is our main camera. It's not a PTZ camera, but we know that it's going to be locked down. It's never going to move. So this is a great main camera. Next, we're going to move to our P100, which is right here. This is a Bird Dog PTZ camera, very small, entry level, but a very good camera. We've been using this camera for several years now. It's great, we love it. Some of the times that we use this, if we have a guest, close up on them. If we have a host that wants to be more personal without the PowerPoint, we'll have them talk to this camera. The great thing about this camera too is that if I wanted to pick up something and say, hey, this is a CX10, and now you can see it a little bit more close up and I can hold it. You can see in a more accurate scale how big the item is. We can go back to the main camera now. So that's the P100. We do have another camera as well. I'm going to keep talking. We do have another camera, but before we move to that one, I'm going to... Okay, we're good. We're going to go to the main camera. Sorry about that, having a little bit of a technical hiccup. So that's our P100. We also have another camera that we will sometimes use for a close-up or demonstration shot, and that is our Bird Dog PF120, which is right here. If I wanted to show off this beautiful Netgear switch, or again, show off that we're using a CX10, and when we have a guest, we plug it into the SDI port on the back of the CX10, and that goes directly into our TriCaster. So just great examples of cameras that you can use and that we do use. So we recommend having a 3-camera minimum setup. When you have a guest in person, occasionally we do that. And even during our normal video guide shows, when we have a guest in person, we'll have our host stand here, we'll have our guest stand here, we have our P100 on our guest, and then we will mount our CX10 on another tripod to have a 3-camera shoot, a wide and 2 close-ups. Now, how do you bring all of this together? And again, we can kind of show off the Netgear switch here. This allows all of our NDI devices to be able to communicate to each other with all of the Ethernet ports on the back of it. So that makes it super easy to set up and make it so all of your NDI devices can communicate to each other. And that is, one of our #1 tech tips that we can give. We say this all the time: get a Netgear M4250 network switch. The last thing that I wanted to talk about that is pretty crucial in our setup is we do have an Atomos Sumo 19, which we use as not only a confidence monitor, but we also use it to record all of our shows. Again, backups. YouTube will record your show and archive it online once you're done with your show, and the TriCaster can record internally, but we always want to have backups. So we have a backup recorder that we use with our confidence monitor, the Atomos Sumo 19, and in doing so, that also makes it very easy to unload, plug that into our computer in the office, convert that file to an H.264 file, compress it, and store it on our personal archive. So just in case something happens to the YouTube file, we have a physical file in our office. Now, this is a workflow of all of the devices that we just talked about. And even though this is an NDI workflow, we do have some physical hardware ports still. The Atomos Sumo is taking a SDI output, taking a program out from the TriCaster. The CX350 and the CX10 are going to be connecting to the TriCaster via an SDI cable. And then everything else that we have in the studio is going to be connected via an Ethernet cable and be used over NDI. So our P100 and our PF120 are connected to our network switch via NDI. And that will give power to the camera, control to the camera, and send the video feed back to the network switch. The other thing that we have on our network switch is our handy dandy laptop, which we usually have covered by something in front of it, so it's not as noticeable. And with that, we have our PowerPoint. Now, going back to the confidence monitor, even though we have the PowerPoint on this monitor, I actually look at the Sumo, so it looks a little bit closer to me looking at the camera versus looking at another screen. And all of those devices, since they're connected to the network switch, will then connect to the TriCaster, making it so all of those devices can communicate with the TriCaster and one another. We currently use a 10-port switch in our studio, which is great for having our 3 cameras plus the TriCaster, and then occasionally, we'll have a demo with additional cameras or a controller. We had a controller hooked up for our bird dog show, and we had 2 of their brand new cameras on the table, and we were able to, do a live demo with the PF120 and have them all connected to our network switch, and then be able to show off the video quality, the smoothness of the controls, and just NDI makes everything so much easier and cable management so much easier. So now things that we can control but are not physical hardware, which would be remote guests. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can bring in a remote guest to a production, and we're going to talk about 2 ways that we have found that we really like. And we're going to talk about pros and cons of both, because there isn't really a way to do this that is 100% perfect. They are very good, but both platforms have pros and cons. And I specifically picked this picture for this slide because I did want to do another shout out. I don't think we made a lower third though, I apologize. Check out this video. If you just Google or YouTube NDI November 2022 New Tech Roundup Table Talk, find this video. This is Jeremy Morris and Chris Burgos from New Tech. They are super smart guys. They are the guys that are working with NDI every single day. And I highly recommend that you check out this video because they do like a 45-minute deep dive into NDI where it is now and where they see it going in the near future and extended future. So definitely check out that video. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is Live Call Connect. Now again, we're using a TriCaster 1 Pro, which comes with Live Call Connect pre-installed on the system. And basically all that does is you open a program on a monitor, a display that's connected to the TriCaster, and it will do a screen capture of that. So whether it's Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Skype, Facebook Messenger, there's a whole bunch of programs that it works with, and it will basically take a screen capture of that monitor and add the video input into your TriCaster so you can have that video input. And then one of the good things about it is that it will automatically do your audio routing as well. So all of your guests or all the audio that is in the Teams call, the Zoom call, whatever it may be, will be routed into the input automatically. So you don't have to worry about your guests hearing themselves, and you don't have to worry about your host hearing themselves, which makes it super convenient. But there are two kind of caveats that we ran into with Live Call Connect during NDI November. The first example is because it's doing a screen capture, when you have multiple people in a call and one person leaves, your screen, Zoom and Teams, et cetera, will automatically change the layout based on what they see fit best. And as you can see in our little demo here, we had two people in a call and one person turned their camera off. So in the picture on the left, you see that Gary is on the bottom left of the frame. He's totally framed perfectly fine. And then our guest, our second guest, left the call but actually had turned off his camera, and that made it so the orientation of the screen capture was no longer true to what it was before. Now it is very easy to fix. You just have to disconnect the call from the TriCaster and reconnect it. It's very, very easy to do. You know, all we had to do was bring Gary off the screen and then reassign the inputs and bring him back on screen. Most people probably wouldn't even notice, but it is something that can happen. Another thing is, since the audio is being routed automatically, you have very little control over it. So again, if you have multiple guests in a call, they have to mute themselves, or you have to mute them in Teams, in Zoom, or whatever program you're using. Otherwise, all input from all audio from that call is going to be brought into your TriCaster under one input. So those are some of the caveats. We wanted to have a little bit more control with our guests, so we also were using Microsoft Teams with Epiphan Connect. Now, what Epiphan Connect does that's different is it will actually extract the individual guests and feeds from a Teams call to bring them into a switcher of your choice, really, as an SRT feed. And the great thing about that is not only do you get the individual video feed, but you also get the individual audio feed. So they will come in as separate inputs. And as a matter of fact, you don't have to extract everybody that's in the call. So let's say, for example, you have a guest and that guest needs to have their supervisor in the call as well, or a PR person in the call as well to make sure that everything is kosher, they're not saying anything wrong, just somebody to bounce off of. Well, you only need to pull your guest into your system. You don't have to worry about adding the other person, the supervisor or the PR person. You just bring in your guest and you will only get them into your system. Now, of course, there are caveats with Epiphan Connect as well. So let's talk about those. The first is the setup time can be a little extensive. It was taking us, especially the first couple times that we used it, upwards of 15 to 20 minutes to, really get the person into the call and make sure everything's squared away. As we progressed through the month and we used it more and more often, we were able to whittle that down closer to 5 to 10 minutes, but it's still going back to, you got to be accommodating to your guests. If your guests don't have that much spare time, You can't risk being using 15 minutes of your 30-minute test call just to get them into the call. One thing that we did want to show this little video. This is just a portion of how to add a guest into it. We did this a couple weeks ago, and I just thought it was really informative. I want to show you that even though it can be a little bit time consuming, it is not difficult at all to do this. So let's show this video real quick just to show you how easy it is to use, even though it is a little bit more involved than using Epiphan Connect. Click on participants. I'm going to click start on her name. I am going to make sure that she is set to listener. I'm going to copy the stream URL, and then I'm going to hit start. So I'm going to go to my desired input. I'm going to go to source, local, add IP source. And now I'm going to, again, hit add new IP source. I'm going to use a web stream, name the input, and then I'm going to paste that URL into there. Take into note that you will have to restart your session in your TriCaster. So now we're back into our TriCaster session. So I'm going to go back over to my input. I'm going to go to local, and now I just need to find that new input, which is right here, Jennifer Epiphan Connect. And as you can see, now if I bring her up in my preview window, there is Jennifer. So like I was saying, it's not very complicated to do, but it is a little bit more involved to do so. The other thing that is a little bit constricting with Epiphan Connect is it only works with Microsoft Teams. So if Microsoft Teams is down, or your guest can't use Microsoft Teams because their company only allows them to use Zoom, for example, well, you can't use Epiphan Connect. And the other thing is if Teams updates, Epiphan Connect may not be able to update right away. And a perfect example of that is on our very first day when we were doing our first show with Tarif Saeed from VizRT. Teams did an update that morning, and we were not able to use Epiphan Connect. But we had our backup, which was Live Call Connect, and we were able to bring him in no problem. And fortunately, we didn't have to worry about other people in the call, so we didn't have to worry about any of the audio issues, that Live Call Connect can sometimes have creep up. So that made it very reliable. And while we're talking about, you have all your hardware, you have your guests in, now where are you going to stream to? We were very fortunate and worked with Digital Joy to basically make us our own website destination. And what they did is make it so we could engage very much so with our audience. If you look on the left side of the screen there, you can see that we were able to pull up polls throughout the entire show, and not just a show, through all of our shows, and then be able to extract that data and either give it to our guests, keep it ourselves, just to see where our audience felt with NDI. It's a relatively new thing. It's been around for a couple years now, but some people are still not sure what it is, want to get into it, don't know where to start. And so this was a lot of great feedback that we were able to get back. And part of the reason that we're actually doing a PTZ show from the beginning next week. So a lot of good information that you can take from it. On the right side, you can see that people are able to ask questions, people are able to comment on things. And not only that, but because it's our own website, we're able to add our own branding, the BDI, the NDI, the NDI November on the bottom. All of that we have total control of, which makes it very, very engaging for the audience. And you don't have to be restricted to YouTube or Facebook's, own marketing. I did want to give a quick shout out as well. Our TriCaster is able to go and send up to 3 streams to different destinations. Again, with testing and testing and testing, we found it was most consistent with using 2, and Restream.io allows you to stream to multiple destinations while only using one source from your encoder. So for example, what we decided to do was to broadcast to broadfield.live and then broadcast to Restream IO from our TriCaster, and Restream IO would then broadcast to Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So just another thing that we thought was super helpful to know. There were a couple other challenges that we came across when we were going about NDI November. One of them was when we have multiple guests in the studio, when we have a guest in person in the studio, we used to be bringing them in to, 2 microphones into 2 receivers into a splitter into the TriCaster, and we found that that could be a little bit unreliable. You can mix up the transmissions. So we decided to get the wireless Go 2s from Rode, and the big perk with these is not only are they small, compact, battery powered, and all of that, it's 2 microphones that can be individually tuned with the decibel levels to 1 receiver going into the TriCaster, so we didn't have to worry about mixing signals or anything. Now, there are multiple solutions that you can do for bringing in multiple microphones into one system. One way that you can do is bringing in your audio into your camera, and then from your camera connection to the TriCaster, such as, the P100 has some audio inputs on the back of it. The CX350 certainly has, both XLR and other audio inputs on them, making it so you can extract the audio that way. And of course, you can use an external audio mixer of some sort to be able to then plug into your TriCaster. But ultimately, we decided for our use and other uses with the microphones to go with the Rode wireless Go 2s. Another thing that we had come up was the request of a teleprompter. And again, we're going to go back to, you always want to accommodate your guests. We did have some guests that not necessarily required, but requested that we use a teleprompter to hit specific, not only keywords, but key sentences that they wanted us to make sure that we got verbatim. And so basically all we did with that was add a monitor underneath our main camera, and we had a Word document open on it. As you can tell, probably, we don't really use teleprompters here. We don't go based off of a script. It's a lot of off the cuff kind of stuff. We do our rehearsal, but we want it to be genuine, off the cuff. And so we did not see the need to invest in a teleprompter for only using it a couple times. One thing I will say with using the teleprompter that we use is, just like looking at our confidence monitor, you will no longer be looking directly at your camera. You're going to be looking at your screen. And if you're doing that on a regular basis, your audience will definitely pick up on that. So if you are going to be limited to a specific script that you have to use, I highly recommend getting a real teleprompter with the see-through glass that you can put in front of the lens on your camera. Other than that, I don't really have any more tips and tricks. You can definitely give us a call. My name is James Frasca, 800-323-2325. You can reach me directly at my extension 1111. I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have, or kind of, help you walk through your own workflow. This is ours. It's not the only one. It's just what we found works good for us. Of course, I have to give a shout out to our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. I do want to say that Gary is not here today. He also will not be here next week. Not sure if I mentioned this already, but next week we are going to be doing an intro into PTZ cameras. So if you are, maybe intimidated by PTZ cameras, that is going to be a great entry level. Get in, get some answers, and we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive as well. So good place to start. I'm going to do the traditional Gary sign off. So that's all I have. And we'll see you next Tuesday, 3 o'clock. Peace.
Video Guys is available Monday through Friday. Give us a call at 1-800-323-2325. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram to stay connected with all of our updates. And you can like us on Facebook. Keep an eye out for our live videos, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.